So we are on. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So I've got problems. I don't have problems. I have tasks for you. So in the midst of you auto-generating all of your documentation, which I'm still surprised that you're not doing that. You're a hard-working guy, and I do have something to read to you, by the way. This is kind of fun.
Well, it's the auto generation problem is the smaller one. The bigger one is that you need to kind of read it, to see if at some point, especially with the GPT-5 that is very eager to answer, but you have to constrain it, right? So one of the kind of tricks for GPT-5 is to kind of tell it what you don't want, and that's going to be quite helpful comparing to maybe older models.
Yeah, I mean, 4 was kind of over the top, 4.0, in terms of being, well, I've never met an AI I didn't like. That's the problem with them, right? Like they are fairly agreeable. I mean, they certainly never seem, I thought some of the first things I did with 5 were a little more down to earth, maybe they've tried to tone it down a little bit, because you're right, it's never going to say no. Or indeed, that's why I kind of go on fishing exhibitions with AI, right? Like if I don't know anything, it's a lot easier to form an opinion with AI. I guess that's my trick, right? Like I think I know something, but I really don't. But I can sort of get myself through a little bit of I mean, what's the point where you aren't ignorant, but you're not really invested either? Is there a point? Is that a point? I don't know, right? Like,
yeah, the indifference.
Enthusiast. Like you can be an enthusiast, right? Like you're not completely out of it, but you're not a professional. Because people, professionals, right? You are one. It's like they're tough. They're hardened.
But the field of computing was created by enthusiasts, right? Like if you watch the Triumph of the Nerd and the Homebrew Club,
Sure.
Computing was created by Wozniaks and people like him, not by tenured professors who decided, like the Xerox lab came up with all the inventions, right? But it was the enthusiasts that kind of took it and put it in front of broad masses like us.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wrote a little bit about, I mean, my take on Xerox was, of course, they had all the money in the world. Great, right? Secondly, they gave it to a bunch of people and said, do whatever. Also great. Didn't really care. And so these people did, in sense, they came up with some really good demos. This is the thing that people don't realize. They did not solve the really hard problems. They solved more of like, what should it be like? You see what I mean? What's sort of the dream? What would get people interested? And when Jobs saw it, he thought they had figured it out, and they hadn't. And so he went to his team and said, "Figure it out." And they're like, "How? And how do you? It's you. I mean, you've been there, or we were both there, I guess. What do you do with 512K of memory? Like, it's pretty insane to imagine doing anything graphically intense." My friend, I just thought of this the other day. My friend was early into imagery on his computer, like Photoshop. He was a photographer, so he kept maxing out his rigs, and I can remember him getting 16 megabyte memory cartridges for like $1,000 each. Like, and then, okay, well, whatever. I don't know. It's like now that just seems patently ridiculous, right? Like what? How would you even do anything with 16 megabytes of memory? Yeah. But then, Steve's team had to do it with 512K of memory, and it's like, anyway, and they did it. So, people are smart, even if they're tyrannical. Anyway, whatever. Even if it's impossible, they somehow manage.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. I mean, I wonder if something like that is happening right now. And when the Steve Jobs interview, kind of when he got invited to Xerox lab, and they have shown him three things. So they showed him Windows operating system, and this is something he understood. They shown him a mouse, right, like a pointer device he understood. And the third thing they have shown him is the internet, the networking of computers, and this is something that he did not understand. So he was running with the first two. So I'm wondering if these kind of situations are happening now, that there's Steve Jobs is out there and they're kind of looking at some stuff and how much they understand it, how much they don't. I think what we are going with all this is the kind of like a AI operating systems, where Windows or Mac will become a device that will be running only one thing, and that's going to be the AI browser, or however we want to call it, and everything else is going to be happening inside that ecosystem that you talk to, right? And so I think that might be.
Yeah. I mean, certainly we've tried voice for, I think, long enough that people are pretty clear that they hate that. Right? I don't know. I mean, it is strange because we both love our Star Trek, right? Because we're like, hey, computer, do something. And it's like, they don't ever seem like, it's just too complicated, I guess, right? That voice command, even when they do it, they did it for 4.0, I think, right? Their demo was, hey, come up with a fun game for us to play. And, and chat, it knows how to pause. It knows how to wait for someone to think. That's obviously hard for a computer to know when you have ceased to tell it what to do. But every time I try to actually think, it does take me a minute to remember what I was going to say. So these are these things. I just don't know. I don't know. As I said, it always works in whatever they call it in fiction, right? Works great in fiction because it's a super shortcut. Like omnipotent machine grants every request. But we could start out, and I think this is what I'm interested in right now. Is like, we're going to do this talk.
Maybe just one more kind of item to this, right? Like in Star Trek Voyager, there is that virtual character that's the EMH, right? Emergency Medical Officer, or medical whatever. So there is the doctor, right? That is holographic AI, right? So if that would be the personality that you can interact with, or as engaging, right? It doesn't have to be the same, but as engaging as this one, where it's going to be sarcastic, it's going to kind of do its work, but it's going to tell you that, hey, you already asked me to do three things today, and now I have to slave over the fourth thing, right? That kind of thing. So if you have an AI operating system that is kind of at this level, right, like extremely helpful, but with its own personality. Robert Picardo was playing that.
Okay, yeah, sure. As I said, robots have been around since what, the 20s? You know what I mean? And
and if you prefer Commander data, go with that. Go with God, right?
But I'm a Robbie the robot guy. Come on, I'm old school. Forbidden Planet, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Will Robinson. Whatever, right?
Or or I would probably go with Nexus 5 or 6, from the Blade Runner. but that would be something. Modern. But this could happen. Maybe 2027 is the date for Apple to come up with new device, right? And that could be the something like a tabletop AI or something, maybe holographic. I don't know. But 2027, right? maybe the big the heavyweights will get there.
If we get to 2027, we'll see. But well, okay. So our topic is agentic AI. I think we both have our ideal in mind, right? Like we just say, hey, if you could somehow just sort of push off the boring stuff, do all the fun stuff. And I guess, by the way, somehow I think people miss out on this, but I would also add only work like half the amount of time that you now work. I mean, maybe maybe that's the part that I think gets missed out on, is that if you put away all the boring stuff, that happens to be oftentimes the time people need to actually charge their battery. You know what I mean? It's not that hard to drive a truck, right? It's somewhat relaxing, but if you didn't get to drive the truck, I guess you would be expected to be doing something else. This is the problem. It's like you can't just say, you know, Jack, you know, I just want you to write 24/7. By the way, this is my problem, is I've been writing and I'm like, I'm kind of at a wall. Like I'm a little bit tired of writing and I think I need a few weeks off from writing, but I keep, you know, being urged to write. And what if, you know, what if my livelihood depended on writing? It's not unreasonable, right? You have to write. You have to write every day, you know, like, oh shit, right? I would not consider that to be like, yay. Yeah, yay. In fact, I don't think our productivity, I mean, this is just me, right? I think our productivity is never, ever going to go up. Like it's impossible for us to really improve that much. We're just not built for it. But we have these illusions, right, that we are more productive. And still, I mean, I don't know. You can throw in whatever you like. Sorry, maybe that's too much. I'm still talking about like what's our agentic AI nirvana? Because I think our audience is actually not going to know anything about what the hell we're talking about. Let's just start there, right?
Yeah, so we will have to show a basic diagram, you know, what an agent is. So that will be a boring thing. So maybe I can contribute the boring diagram.
I want you to contribute all the boring diagrams, Jack. Come on.
Right, but then okay. So what is this in it, right? I think that.
So hey, I've got a quick one on that one.
Okay.
Do me a favor if you haven't used whatever they're called. I know there's one online, but whatever. Make the diagram. Can you do that? Because I can remember this from when I was teaching once, that I had everything on the board, right? I had all the slides up and my slide projector went out. And so I had to write things. Speaking of people not being able to move fast, if you could make the diagram, I think people will follow. Sorry, you know what I mean? If it's already made, it's kind of like, that's the hard part, you know, that's the hard part, which is you have to follow a narrative. Just think it through. I understand. Maybe you could make it like that it'll play itself as a little loop, you know what I mean? Or I'm sure there's some that'll do that, but it's for people to follow, because sometimes I love your diagrams, but you know what I mean? You're like, here it is all at once. You know what I mean? And
that's a good idea.
Anyway, you could try it, and I think that'll be fun for you to try. How's that? Maybe, you know, hey, it's a tough crowd. I don't even know, right?
Yeah.
So sorry, keep going. Diagram. Yep.
Yeah. So I think you know, the kind of the thing that we can talk about would be okay. So yeah, what's in it for us, right? This productivity question is probably important in the kind of like a real life situation. Maybe not to you and I, but yeah, generally it is. So I think that I think the concept of being a nerd, right? If you can turn your work into this kind of like a nerdy experience, where, you know, in the early days of the phones, people were phone nerds because they were using the phones not to call somebody, but they were using the phones in order to use the phone, right? And then there was the computer nerdiness, where people were not using the computers to do computation. They were doing it in order to be able to use a computer. So now, if the agents can kind of do this the same to our jobs, like, hey, you know, I'm just kind of like sorting boxes, you know, at Amazon. But, you know, if the agent can make it kind of exciting, so that I will kind of try to do that, you know, in an environment where I have an AI that is kind of like, I'm going to do this in order to do this because I think it's a fine experience, then maybe there's something that can kind of turn the knobs a little bit on the productivity.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of really good points. Okay, so one, I think that word productivity is super interesting, because should that be a big topic? We're like, hey, we're going to invent agentic AI in order to increase productivity. Is that a thing?
I don't know if this is going to be interesting for this audience, right? But there's kind of an aspect to it, right? And then there is the contrarian aspect, right? And that's the screenshot from that famous report from IBM,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think they made that one up too. Now that I start to think everything is fake, but all right, yeah. So
we shouldn't be doing this because AI will never be accountable, so it cannot possibly make any autonomous decisions for us. Or even
okay, here's a good one. Can it make a mistake? Well,
yeah, whose mistake is that? Right?
Sure. I think that is a more interesting hook. I don't know. We can go into it, right? Because I just had this happen the other day. Literally just was sitting there where somebody gave me the wrong thing, right? I asked for this thing. They gave me the wrong thing and a receipt. And I'm like, but you gave me the wrong thing. So then they had to go in and correct the mistake and the mistake that they made. And and this was called customer service. So this is really interesting to me because I think making mistakes is also like most of the reason that we are around, right? Because if we were just somehow machines, right? We can't, like you said, you can't blame a machine because it just ran out of oil, or can't blame. Who do they blame Chernobyl on? Anyway, but do you see my theme? What do you think of this theme? Mistakes.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, who did they blame Chernobyl on? They certainly didn't blame it on the reactor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was kind of a systemic failure, right? Kind of exactly the same thing you can say about Tesla's crashing into walls, right? Whose fault is that? I mean, it's a system that contains testing, the development issues, capability issues, usage, so yeah, I mean, that's a good one.
Well, okay, so we start with this, we can do the IBM, you can never make a decision, and yet, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can throw a heavyweight here. This is not sure if
the
it
killer
is
apps, okay.
Killer apps, right? So it's about military applications of AI, right? So it's not a killer app, in a commercial sense, right? So yeah, the stakes are going up.
Well, and here's what's interesting is that because it's out of favor, is it out of favor? I mean, it seems to be more about well, I think it still is about being human, right? So if you were a human and you were saying, hey, we need about 10,000 humans to have some fairly expensive training, feed them, clothe them, put them in a place, train them, and then have them go and just kind of randomly shoot people when we ask them to. I guess that's what an army is, right? You'd say like, boy, it's certainly a lot easier to have all these drones with guns on them because you don't have to feed them, you don't have to train them, you might have to control them. But then that's why apparently warfare now is just a bunch of video, it's like a video game thing where people are just, like whatever. And when you think of the costs, nobody is going to want to hire people to do this. I think, even if that person may decide not to shoot that person because they look nice and shouldn't be shot, or whatever terrible things people have to do in war, right? Like, maybe people will make a better decision, but I still think it's mistakes. I'm going to put this, making mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, to educate, to train a fighter pilot, I think it's at least a $10 million investment in one person.
And what do they do again other than the Top Gun stuff?
Yeah, so that's exactly, the good question, right? So Tom Clancy, was really brilliant at kind of explaining the warfare, right? So you have this highly trained pilot on this highly, kind of sophisticated system that he's flying, and basically the strategy here is that if you have near peer adversary you basically get to the maximum range of your weapons, you release them, and you get the hell out of there, right? That's probably the strategy. And then, if your weapons overwhelm the defenses of the other side, then you had a successful attack. Otherwise, you are losing your assets because the weapons that are coming at you, something that will for sure destroy you, right? So this Top Gun stuff, and all those romantic stories are actually not applicable to anything.
Oh, no, as I said, as far as I know, we just screw up half the time, which is kind of our, batting average, right? Or let's just say, I mean, in a real batting average, I think it's a third for the best batter ever. Okay, so good. And we're both huge fans of normal distributions, right? So, hey, you know what? If our batting average is a third, that 1/3 of the things we do turn out okay, well, which is fine. As I said, I think we're used to it, and I think we bake it in. It used to be that when our productivity was sort of throughput, well, then you scale from more people, more time, right? Like, hey, if we know that we need 10 cars made, we'll double the production line, and so we should get 20 cars made. Yeah. Anyway, I'm bad at business, but whatever, right? Like, but we don't say, oh, to build that other line and to train these new people, and you know what I mean? We're talking huge investments, right? Where what if you don't know? I think this has supposedly happened with the good old what's that Tesla car that sucks? I don't know, whatever. Like they wanted to build 300,000 of them, but they cannot sell 3,000 of them.
Was that the roaster that they put on the rocket and sent to orbit? Was that the roaster?
No. I think it's the truck. Sorry. The truck apparently was going to be, everywhere, and
like
yet,
it's kind of very cyberpunkish.
Well, how about this? It apparently didn't meet the expectations, but the point was they built the factory anyway. They built the capability to make 10,000 or 100,000 of these things, but they can't sell 3,000 of them. So that's sunk cost. And just like you're saying, we don't go and build these mega death machines without them failing, because they seem to always fail, right? That's kind of the norm. And okay, great. That's human, and we're happy. We're just humans. We screw up 2/3 of the time, but the cost is considerable. So maybe Agentic AI is supposed to normalize our mistake-prone existence? I don't know. Actually, I never thought of it that way. Is that the point of AI? It's supposed to keep us from making mistakes now?
Well, the point was probably always the research, right? During the Shannon's times and John McCarthy, but now now it's a commercial endeavor, right? Like now it's all about profit. So either from the AI itself or through productivity, right? Because now you kind of have new applications that you are enabling through it, and robotics is going to be the biggest one. I mean, the Asimo robot and Honda, they spent probably 3 decades developing something that can go up and down the stairs and kick a ball, very, very lightly and kind of do this, right? And now
I think this is theater, though. I mean, this is always just theater. I mean, all that Boston Robotics stuff is about how to make money by not making anything reasonable, because they all get a lot of money. I mean, that's the point. They all get funded because we like those better than Cybertrucks, apparently, right? Little robot people. We've always loved little robot people, Jack.
We did, right? And Boston Robotics is maybe an example of a kind of defense focused
But again,
corporation.
you don't need a human-shaped thing. You just fly a little bomb around now. It's a million times better, but it just isn't cute.
You do in a few cases, right? So I think the idea behind the Asimo robot was basically the Japanese demographic problem, where they need to have people in hospitals that can kind of change the sheets, like lift maybe a bedridden patient, that kind of thing. So the Asimo was basically a nurse or a helper, right? And then for the Boston Dynamics, I think there is plenty of scenarios, like, for example, where there is firefighting situations, and the humanoid shape that can walk on legs and has arms is going to be helpful, as a firefighter, or kind of situations like in Fukushima, where you have a high radiation situation and you need to walk on rubble, right? And
these are the least probable uses of all time. This is the whole point. Like, when is this ever going to pay off? Like, you have to spend billions for these super niche things that, by the way, people can do. I'm just like, that's the whole point of caregivers. They're really nice. You should pay them and whatever, right? Like, why replace somebody that literally is why humans are here in the first place? You see what I mean? Like,
you're romanticizing.
And you're spending billions. This is the other thing. I mean, the billions, I think, are the grift, by the way. Well, and the use cases, I mean, you have a house squirting water. Like, we've figured that part out about firefighting. This going in and grabbing people stuff is great, but it's still not the major use case. You see what I mean? Like, you've already solved the problem, I think.
But how do you solve this societal problem that you are talking about? Yes, it would be great.
Yeah, I know. This is what I mean.
It would be great to have a caregiver that really cares, right? That is a great person, that somebody like that would be kind of like has a status in the society. But the fact is that caregivers are probably one of the most underpaid, yet terribly important group, and people are saying bad things about those low-end care centers where you don't have the the resources to pay.
But I'm saying billions into robots doesn't change any of that. You see what I mean? Like, it's really never going to solve the problem. Come on, like, you're never going to make these robots for the kind of money, like you said, that we don't want to pay actual people. Sorry, I don't know. I'm a socialist anyway, so whatever. It's like, you know what it's like. It's always this kind of grab, because you can pretend to. I mean, we have an insurance whatever world that doesn't care for anybody, right? But they soak up most of the money. And they dictate how much money is spent. And it's like, well, wait a second, what do you guys do? So, by the way, here was the quote. And I think this applies to both of us. How's this? The doer. This is the doer. The doer is extremely important as well, but is becoming harder and harder to be a doer. Doers are important because they understand the concrete steps to getting to outcomes and care about them as integral. They look at the flow of markets, they look at people and capabilities, they have hard skills like coding, writing, creating art, and carry more fundamental perspective on building things concretely as who they are. The doer wakes up each morning excited to make something and seeing it in the world and seeing it work. Some are even crazy enough to want to actually fix something. The chief outcome that they look for is positive usage and fit within concrete metrics that prove that fit. It's kind of a torturous statement, but I mean, the thing this is being contrasted to is the grifter. The grifter wants to sell things. Basically, they want the money, but they don't want to make things. And I just had my wife, by the way, go out to get some money for a piece that she sold. So she made a piece, the piece was exhibited, apparently the piece was sold, and it's a pretty big piece, and we're pretty happy to have a little money, all that kind of good stuff, right? But the person who runs the gallery is probably not going to pay her half, which is already a lot. She's probably going to pay her much less. And we kept thinking, why is it the people that don't make things always prioritize the profit to themselves before the profit to the maker? Sorry, back to being a socialist. You see what I mean? It's like the profit to these companies who make robots is the point. And the caregiving and whatever firefighting is going to happen is not the point, right? I mean, that is, in a miracle world, that is an outcome. Just like I keep thinking, wondering why all these taxis, right? Like there was this world. Okay, now I'm going to go on a tangent. Sorry, because I'm mad about this.
All right.
Okay, there's this world where you had to spend inordinate amount of monies to be licensed to be a taxi provider. I don't know why. Let's just call it false scarcity, right? There's some false scarcity that we couldn't have just everyone be a taxi driver, so you have to spend millions on taxi medallions. And depending on the place you are, the licensing itself it's just tons of money, right? And then that creates legislation, it creates a whole middle ground, it's a whole economy, let's call it that. So if you wanted to get a ride in a taxi, good luck. You know what it's like, right? We've lived through that. And then suddenly this company comes around and just decides to say, oh, never mind, we can do all of this without taxi medallions, without any of this, and we're just going to let people drive whenever they want to. And Uber and Lyft or whatever, and however many there were, seem to take over a lot of the market, right? And then things stabilize, they destabilize. But the interesting thing to me is now they have driverless taxis. Here's my gripe, which is once you had the ability in your spare time to use this car, which, by the way, is the worst thing on earth that we've ever invented, right? Like, here's this hunk of metal that does not provide any income, needs constant upkeep, right? And is unused most of the time, right? Like, they just take up space. They're not very useful is what I'm getting at, right? They're not a great invention. They happen to work, in certain situations, but they're not efficient in any way. So you could go and use your car to go make some money to pay for your car or whatever. Or you could use your car to go pick up things or whatever you could do as a human to offset both maybe spare time that you need more money or whatever. Like it's a gig, right? That to me is like, okay, good thinking, good problem solving, right? Good use of technology, let's call it that. When you take away the driver, what is the point? I think it goes back to your robot thing. Like now you've invented a car that can drive around sort of by itself, but what problem does that solve? The cars are extremely expensive, right? I don't think the rides are cheaper. I don't think that if the consumer doesn't benefit, the technology doesn't benefit, but yet the amount of hype and money being thrown at this problem is now sort of like puzzling to me. That's all. Like this, and maybe this is another thing. Agentic AI, what problem does this solve?
Well, this is relatively easy, right? Comparing to everything that you are saying, the agentic architecture is basically a way to distribute the problem into multiple places, right? And perhaps enable additional data to come in, perhaps enable parallel computation, because maybe on your desktop you don't have enough resources to actually solve this. Right, so the agentic problem I kind of understand and kind of can defend. Now it's very difficult to kind of like defend or discuss the problems that you are talking about, because I mean we may
and sorry, who knows? What I'm saying is I'm guessing it's to make a lot of money, but not actually to solve a problem. That's easy. That's easy because so what, right? You can make a lot of money and not solve any problems if you can pitch it right,
And we may disagree, on the scale, like, hey, usefulness of a car, whether it's a little bit more on that side or a little bit less on that side, right? So we can discuss.
They don't generate income for the most part, right? They usually cost more than they generate.
Yeah, probably,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
or kind of like in the ideal situation, maybe that shouldn't be the case. But I think the deeper thing, that maybe the underlying thing, is that, okay, so socialism, right? The system, right, and then maybe the capitalistic kind of the system, right? So what are the feedbacks that they are kind of spinning under the hood, right? So I grew up in a socialist system, and there's some things that I was observing, and like those flywheels are kind of like working against each other, right? Like the socialist system was always focused on slowing you down.
Yep.
Like okay, so I can wake up, to your point, right? I can wake up, be enthusiastic, kind of like to the quote, right? But then the system is going to tell me very clearly, right, in socialism, that, okay, if I do more today, it will be frowned upon, because it's always also a central it was always a centrally managed system. Maybe not kind of like capital, like Washington DC would kind of tell people, oh, you do this or that, but it was always kind of based on a contractual management with a higher authority. And that contract that you had this year was supposed to be optimal, and if you did more, then you either expose the power, the higher power, the central committee, the Soviets, whatever, that they kind of made a mistake and they set up the contract wrong way, because you are clearly doing more. So it's blame on them, right? Or it's blame on you, because maybe, oh, you are managerial, you are really trying to be a capitalist, and that's an anti-system kind of thing. So that the feedback was definitely negative, because of that. Now, on the other hand, you have the capitalistic system where you have the gallery manager, that is trying to just maximize their income, their profit, right? And they will try to kind of like do it maybe ethically or maybe unethically, but that's a positive feedback, right? Like, there is more. I want to do more, or I want to get more, and maybe that is going to be productive or counterproductive, but there's going to be a feedback that goes in that direction. So I think the history very clearly says that, well, the ethics on both sides can be terrible, right? So the people,
Sure.
the system,
Oh, yeah.
the ethical systems are on both sides have a potential to be very, very terrible. Although I think also the history says that the ethics on the socialist system was a lot more kind of like killed a
Well,
lot
and
more people.
remember, just to give it context, I might be speaking in some sort of strange textbooky way, right? Like realities of social systems, like we're in post-capitalism, we could be in post-socialism. Everything gets very distorted in reality, right? Like, we're not Marxists, right? But Marx, had interesting things to say, whatever. It's not like there's complete truth in anything. It's just that we in post-capitalism, I guess, right? Because I guess we won capitalism, I guess. That's how it worked here in the US. So then we get to be post-capitalists, which mean you don't have it's monopolistic. That's all, right? Like monopolism always wins. Monopolism goes back to the problem with socialism, right? Like once you have one center of control, it's always going to be corrupt. Just because.
Exactly. Yeah. And
if it's the state, it's kind of worse, right? Than if you're just buying donuts from a company. You can just decide not to buy donuts from them or something.
And maybe those systems are converging, right? Maybe socialist system is the ultimate monopolistic system, and the capitalist system is always trying to converge to that Nash equilibrium where
right. Oh,
where
good
we
point.
are somewhere, right?
Game theory is always part of this, right?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's a very deep discussion now where the AI is going to fit in, right? Like removing the drivers, right? What is it serving, right?
Well,
maybe
going in to rescue the burning victim thing, changing the bed sheets for the elderly patient. I mean, I don't want to do robotics because I don't think robotics is AI, and I just kind of think the whole thing is like the robot cars, where the problems outweigh the benefits pretty quickly. And while it's a fun engineering problem, it's like, have you ever played a game where afterwards you realize all the effort you put into winning the game only applies to this game?
Yeah.
It's like checkers versus chess, right? Like maybe checkers, there is no ultimate learning to be had from being a good checkers player, right? It's a little random, you know? Whereas chess, you could sort of pretend like, well, yeah, there is actually something I can use and apply this to real life, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, probably no. I mean, there's this story
Probably
about
not, yeah.
Garry Kasparov, you know, arguably probably the strongest chess player ever existed. He wanted to go into politics, which is kind of like a natural extension of chess, you know, people might say.
Yeah.
And he did terrible, right? He didn't, you know, he was not particularly skilled at strategy, you know, in politics. He was not particularly, skilled at tactics, short term, long term. You know, he did terrible. And so the skill set is clearly not transferable from chess to politics. So if it's not there, then I would venture, you know, kind of like a thesis that, you know, I probably no, you know, chess is not applicable to real life too much.
Well, then, so we're stuck with this 1/3 batting average, right? Like if that's where we're at, then will agentic AI keep us from making mistakes?
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe to your point, maybe I particularly myself, probably I'm not, you know, in the best seat to actually answer those questions, because I am enthusiastic actually about autonomy, right? So self-driving car is for me a nerdy kind of problem, right? I would like to see this only because in order to see, you know, self-driving cars, you know, and I'm probably not equipped to address the social impacts, right? And maybe there's positive, maybe there's negative. For sure, there is, you know, negatives, right? But yeah. So you are talking to somebody who is enthusiastic about all that, right? So I might.
Well, I just think of the problem space. I mean, the problem space to me is odd because, for whatever reason, and this again, I'm just trying to say thematically, we need to figure out. God, how is it we talk for an hour and still haven't figured out what we're going to talk about? But maybe we could just have constant diversions. I don't know. I mean, will this be interesting to an audience? Boy, this is rough. Okay, so now we're at this problem where I'm trying to say, if a basic hook is that agentic AI is AI making decisions, okay? And because we can say, hey, we know pretty much that our decisions tend to be usually 1/3 or 2/3 wrong. And that most of our efforts, let's just pretend, and a lot of our professions are about mitigating mistakes. I guess that would be the point of any management, right? Like you try to correct from mistakes or learn from mistakes. And I will say thematically, I'm like, you only learn from mistakes, right? Like that's kind of the way humans are built. Yet we can also not learn from our mistakes, right? We can hide them and obscure them and pretend that they don't exist, right? And that's where AI, maybe we have a little bit, I always think maybe there's a little bit of, not blame the AI, but sort of to realize, I guess, that the appearance of being correct is something that AIs do pretty easily, and that we have a harder time with, right?
Well, unless you are a professor, right? Then you are trained to.
Exactly. You see, you know, now you know the game. When you control somebody's grade, why do you think the socialists, you know, if you control the means of production, you know, it's like that's the point. Like you get to game it however you want. But I still think that's why I think AI should be in charge of everything rather than do anything, you know, because all that bookkeeping whatever, right? Like it's just as error prone, but nobody complains about the finance department. You know what I mean? They control your budget, so you better not complain. So again, it's where there's conflicts of interest, or maybe there's lack of skills, or maybe the fact that if everyone's going to make a mistake one, all the time, how I just don't understand, like, why are we building agentic AI except to mitigate mistakes? Like it probably, oh, I know, we could use the self-driving car. Let's say it runs into people less than people do. However, statistically, weirdly enough, we don't run into each other that often. That's what I'm always surprised, because driving isn't that hard, right? Like, it's not that much of a torture, and so what, right? And we also somehow have bigger and bigger cars, so we're less likely to be injured, which is even more ridiculous, right? Because we should all have tiny little cars that are AI driven, that don't use any energy or whatever cool thing we can come up with, but nobody wants to build those cars. That's what's funny, is that the problem isn't being solved. And that's probably grift, but it employs a lot of people and it's fun problems. But you've worked on problems before. I mean, we're on tape, but I mean, even now you've been working on this for quite a while, and this is obviously a much harder problem than you thought it was, or anybody thought it was, right?
Yeah, I mean, talking about car, coming back to the car issue, I mean, every single car that we are building, even the most economy car, is going to be capable of going twice the maximum speed limit. So even the cheapest car will do that. And there is only one place in the world that allows for those speeds, and that's the German Autobahn, which, by the way, has been proven that can be safe. Actually, the statistics say that going pedal to the metal on an Autobahn is one of the safest things that you can do. So that's why they keep it. But then, okay, so if you are buying an average car, that average car is going to go 120, 150 miles an hour, and that's a jail time, if you are caught at that speed. So I would like to know, why are we building cars that way? To your point, maybe they should be like a radical redesign, or why don't we have autobahns where we can use the capabilities of those cars? Right. So, either way, something is wrong.
How do they not have traffic jams? That's the whole point, right? Like, is the Autobahn just from like Frankfurt to like some place that people never drive to? Because we have California. Like, you can't drive in California.
Yeah. So this is kind of like special kind of sections of very well maintained highways where they allow high speed, but there's probably some traffic jams, around big cities. But most of the time, you are just going very, very fast. And yeah, I don't know how to deal with that issue, logically, right? It's
the easy answer is you don't have any cars, right? You just have public transportation, which is always a bus. I mean, actually, buses are probably the greatest invention ever, because they work great, they're really comfortable, and if they had the roads to themselves, there would be no issue with taking the bus, right?
Yeah, or something like the Shinkansen. You probably experienced, those wonderful trains in Japan, right? Why don't
they have them everywhere
those?
now? They have them in Portugal. Sure, you go 250 kilometers an hour, right? It's
wonderful,
great,
right? So why can't we have those things? And yeah, so the systemic question,
because they cost a tremendous amount of money that isn't self-driving cars or robots. You see what I mean? There, it's not sexy to replace hundreds and hundreds of miles of track, but it's a great investment for this future. And that's really, the investment in AI, I think, is also great because it's been offloaded to I mean, oh God. See, I think we're gonna have to go into the economics of it because, right? I mean, the whole point of this is it benefits NVIDIA. What did NVIDIA ever do? Nothing, right? They totally lucked out, right? Totally lucked out, didn't have any plans for this whatsoever. Just so happened,
well,
right?
They did something very useful, right? They kind of made the GPUs for gaming very popular.
Well, that's what I mean. But that was just a fun side. You know what I mean? People do that for fun. They don't make the GPUs for PlayStations. They don't make the GPUs, for Apple computers, right? So, they had their very, very big niche, right? In build your own PCs.
Yeah.
You've got one, your sons have them. You know what I mean? Hey, I need to push X amount of pixels. I hyper cooled. You know what I mean? It was very, very niche.
Yeah, in order to play Mortal Kombat.
In order to play Mortal Kombat. And then we all realized, right, this amazing, amazing idea came up, and these things became useful, and they've cashed in and are continuing to cash in beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Okay.
Because somebody found about the matrix multiplication on GPU is much faster than
100%.
CPU.
Oh,
and then
yeah. I mean, certainly RISC or CISC CPUs, I can't even imagine how slow it would be, right? Like, I don't even think it does that math very well, right? It's just too dumb of a math. But that's the same thing with any of these advancements. It always requires, I mean, I've been an Apple guy forever, and I know we're out of time. But how many processors have Apple been through? 5? Right? 5 different architectures. And what made them fun was that they kept changing their minds, right? They would just rewrite everything because they didn't have this rampant gamer group. They didn't have the I don't want to change anything group in corporate, right? Like, they don't want to rewrite their anything ever, pretty much. I mean, you're in that world now, right? Like, nobody wants to ever go in and change stuff that works, even if it doesn't work that well.
Yeah.
Okay, so but with Mac, it's like, hey, as long as you can run an OS and as long as you have this look and feel, then fine. And I think maybe that's another thing we could. We might have to do this over email, but we need to figure out what we're talking about, because I'm worried. They're rough in Northwestern. Like, they're going to expect us to do a good job. Sorry.
Well, we may have more questions than answers, right? I mean, I think
that's true. I can definitely say we can open it up, right? But I think we need to have
that we can say that, hey, we don't know, right? So I can say very easily, start with this initial diagram and outline the obvious architectural thing, right? Which is that, hey, we have some sort of input data, right? And we need to have a distributed environment that kind of does things, like here and there and there, and maybe call a tool, maybe call a sensor, call a database. And that's the agent, right? That's the agent architecture. And now we can start asking a question, right? I mean, is that really something that we can justify, given everything, right? And
well, get back to like, an agent makes a decision. Because here's a thing that might be helpful, and I think you could do a great job at it, by the way, is the idea of an algorithm, right? Like, everyone's heard this word. I don't think anyone really knows what it is. So you could probably show them, like, here's a typical algorithm, right? And an algorithm is going to take probably in, some wacky taxonomy, right? And it's going to put in some sort of float, and there you go, right? Whatever, right? Like, it's probably going to be human readable to a point, right? That, hey, Jack likes, and you do one for yourself. You'd be like, here's my algorithm if I go on YouTube, right? Jack likes robots and he likes gaming PCs or whatever. You see what I mean? And then you can say, well, this is what an algorithm, this is what it looks like. So whenever it goes into search, because I think searching is a big topic, because that's how most use computers anyway, right? They're just going to search for something. And what we're trying to say is, search, turn it over. It's going to tell you what to do. That's what I think of when I think of agentic, right? It's going to say, hey, it's time for your meeting. Hey, you need to go here. Hey, like, it's going to be proactive. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think of as agentic. Because we could always say, hey, I know exactly the algorithms they use to tax my income. I know that all these things are not clever at all, right? They're probably just formulas, right? Hey, if I made $10 more than X, they're going to tax me at this percentage point, right? Like, we're used to that, and we could complain. We could be like, oh, but I'm only $5 over. Oh, tough. Anyway, you see what I mean? I think let's come up with, because mental models might not be as sophisticated as how they work. It may just be, what are they, right? Like what should we be concerned about? Because I keep wondering, well, I like AI because it makes computers easy to use. End of story, right? But now that I've been using them for a couple of years, what do I like AI for? I'm a little more wary now, because what I used to use them for, I don't need them for anymore.
Yeah.
I used to use them because I wasn't confident about my writing skills. And then I've started to write more, and the more I write, the more confident I am in my writing skills, so I don't need it as much. And it often is like with you, it can't write your documentation because it really doesn't know what you're doing anyway, right? It knows kind of what you're doing, but you have to know what you're doing in order to feel confident.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get to the, I'd just like to get more to what would people come to this for? And problematically, because we're so advanced, you and I, right? Like, we are 2 to 3 years ahead of everybody else. Most people couldn't care less about AI, except, that it's going to ruin the universe. And true. Hey, I read the thing too, and I was like, well, wait, why weren't we complaining about this with data centers? Why weren't we complaining about this with cloud? You know what I mean? Like, we kind of invented this world of pretty massive computer usage being normal. Nobody complained about it then, and now you just said, well, these things are really like having your battle bot of, what was it? Your robot fighting game being played 24/7 by 100 million people, right? Like, it has to compute that much in order to even be on.
Yeah.
And I just said, well, and I kind of went through this today. I know we have to run, but I said, like, hey, we've been good at making efficient. It's H264. Like, they're going to figure out how to do this with less computing power. Like, that's just what we do, right? Right now, it's going to take a million gazillion gigawatts or whatever, but doesn't mean it will forever. Or maybe it will. I mean, that could be another thing too. Agentic AI is a threat because of its energy usage.
Yeah, during the heyday of Intel, right? And the growth was at the helm of Intel, and Bill Gates was, at Microsoft still. So the saying was, "And the grow giveth," computing power, and Bill Gates taketh, right? So whatever the increases that Intel came up with, Microsoft was using it immediately for fluff, right?
Well, and I'd say that our industry, this is another thing, is completely unable to do anything that has any ethical outcomes, right? Like, we are unable to think of the effects. And that's why you're not going to put money into a train. You have to think about that. Like, hey, we need this train to last for 100 years, and we need this to be, go back and forth and whatever, right? Like, that's engineering like a bridge. You don't engineer it like for today, but we build everything for the next 15 minutes because we don't have any discipline, I think, right? Like, we're not clever as an industry, I don't think, because that's why people can make it so big, I suppose. I mean, anyway, I don't know. We'll figure out. I'll try not to say the word socialism that much, but we have to say immature.
Yeah.
And yeah, because even the old AI, which I also think old and new AI needs to be differentiated, right? The generative AI is so different from old AI, And you could help us with that too. Like I tried to say this, it was like, yeah, this was great at really good data sets like roads. Like, this is why it can do self-driving, is that it's been taught where all our roads are. And it keeps a pretty good database, because without a database, it's not going to figure out anything, right? It can't get anywhere if it doesn't have a database. And that means 24/7 has to be connected to the internet, because remember the old days when you used to have the DVDs that you got once every 5 years of all the routes to run? Yeah, no, my dad had one of those, and I was like, oh wow, like this is so futuristic, but you got to get one of these every few years. And I'm like, obviously this 24/7 all information is perfect world is also kind of an illusion, but that is the fuel, right? Like that's the fuel. All our data is perfect. There you go, Jack. There's you. All our data is perfect and actionable by a computer.
Yeah, that's the holy grail.
No, I'm saying that's where we have to start. Is that true? Or are we completely delusional?
yeah, we are. Yeah. But
well, a little bit. I mean, a little bit, right? That's the problem, right? It's good enough if people are involved, right? I don't want an AI flying a plane. It could probably do a fine job. But could it all the time? Would it make less mistakes than a human? Probably. But I mean, just to give us, kind of more of a hokey, I don't know. Think of any of those, but just write back any ones that you think you can do any deep dives into.
Okay.
That would be good, because we could keep it like this, but I don't know. I don't know. It's probably more than they're used to. We'll see.
We will have how much, maybe 30 minutes, maybe, right?
I mean, unless we get lots of questions, I don't know. I mean, I thought of bringing in another person. I thought that could be fun. But
no,
then
I mean,
it's harder on Zoom, I guess, right?
Somebody will be there, maybe for moderating, right? Maybe last 10, 15 minutes are going to be questions.
I don't know. I think we might have to monitor it ourselves. I didn't hear that my dean was going to show up, so.
No, it's going to be a format that is a little bit uncomfortable for us, because
I know. Well, that's,
we are getting.
I told them we had a podcast. I guess that means we're pros, man. See.
So we will have to maybe really kind of like be organized around our slides and kind of maybe.
I don't think we can show slides though. We'll see. We'll see. But you see what I mean is I did the slideshow, and I think it was fine, but do you want to build a slideshow in the next week? I'm just thinking that's where it gets tricky, because you have to know your audience for a slideshow. So I did it like Leo Burnett style. Like it's just picture, you know what I mean? And I could improvise. Anyway, it's one of those like real open-ended, anyone can show up. But think through anything that you think needs to be illustrated visually, anything that we can narrate, I think is good, right? Anything debatable is always fun, right? Because then we can do our thing.
Well, that's easy, right? We are debating all the time. It's just that we can spend half an hour on just kind of like one sentence, right? And
well, that's why I'm saying let's try to have at least like a thesis. Neither of us went to debating school, obviously, where you learn how to do this properly. I always admire that. Like, yeah, why didn't I ever take this in school, right? But you're supposed to outline, maybe you do the positive and I'll do the negative or something. I don't know. Come up with any sort of like, here's the topic. We have this thing, Agentic AI. I think it's going to be the greatest thing ever because of this, that, and the other reason. And then I can say, here's, but Jack, you're wrong, or whatever. But I will share my point of view, and then what we can do is we can do polls or something. I mean, everyone likes to get involved. So maybe we could do some sort of like, hey, well, where do you guys fall? Like, do you not know what it is? Do you have good feelings about it, bad feelings about it, and what are the issues that you see, or something? I don't know. I'm making this shit up. This is
Well,
kind of where
I'm gonna need two diagrams probably. One is gonna be the diagram of an agent, and another one is the diagram. Maybe the very first one will be the algorithm diagram. What are
right,
the
but you're
tools?
not going to be talking to people who have any training to understand these diagrams unless they're really like basic.
Yeah, so it will be basic. So I'm gonna make something, like real life, maybe.
Well, what about an example though? I mean, what about, is there any place that uses anything agentic, right? I don't know that anyone is even using this except, is a self-driving car really isn't agentic?
Yeah, it
Like,
is. It is actually. Yeah, because it's kind of uses sensor input. It makes decision. Do I go left? Do I go
but
right?
a decision making, we've had that forever, right? That's still just an algorithm. It's computable, right? It isn't improvisational.
But it has the proactivity. That is your feature that you like, right? It has a real-time input. That is a feature that we are talking about quite a bit, and we have consequences of an action.
Go into a self-driving car, say, I need to make it to this place in 15 minutes. It would never be able to understand or handle that, right? Like, it doesn't know anything about the real world, right? It's not ever going, but that's a reasonable thing to say to a human being, right? That's what I mean, this is what I mean by agentic. Like, can it ever do the things that we seem to have no problem doing? Just think about it. Just think about it. But we can leave this one behind if we need to. I don't know.
Okay.
But maybe we have a little bit of a script because it is a fair amount. It's an hour. We gotta fill some time. You know what you're talking about, and I think it's just trying to figure out how do we reach an audience, which I did okay with. But I was very like, here's the basics, right? Like nothing more than a picture. I did the picture of the math of the softmax attention algorithm, and that probably blew their minds. But it was on there for a second, just to be a math problem. I didn't explain it because I don't understand it myself, right? But I just meant like, here's a math problem that had these big repercussions. So that's what I mean in terms of like, how deep would they want to go? Not deep at all. This is somebody's lunch. They're chewing on a sandwich if we're lucky. They probably think AI is going to take over their job. Whatever. Just come up with a persona that you think you could tell a story to, and it isn't Vince. Right? Because you know the game, man. You know the game. Like, you don't have to accomplish anything, right? You're there to be in the future. Like, is this ever going to get anywhere? I don't know, but I trust that if we get anywhere, Jack's a good guy. He'll figure out whether we're going to get there or not. But the Cotters of this world, they don't care.
Okay, let me stop the recording.
Stop the recording. But we'll have to share some ideas over email.